play with a merchant's play and its interaction with a Three Marys approach to the tomb. I've given you a screenshot today, another Fastnachtspiel. Last time I gave you the screenshot from this Arztfastnacht. This is another stock comedy, Die Bauernhochzeit, which you can more or less imagine the type of farce that is enacted. And the figure of the merchant's wife has some of these elements from the women in the Fastnachtspiele and wedding plays, the kind of inverse gender relationship with the women answering back, but also the description of beautiful or ugly of women, and you see her there with a stick with which she'll be beating up her husband in a moment. So we had not quite covered with linguistic discussion the section I had set for lecture 3. So I'll start with going through the text slightly before then the 838, what will be the part that Konstantin and I will then act out, so we won't dramatically read again the part we covered last week, but I thought we should look at some of the key terms which we didn't get to last week. Also, in this section, it's interesting how certain insults are picked up. You might remember the Hundespulver from the soldiers who are accused of being good for nothings, only good to pick up Hundespulver. And here, since we don't know what actually was understood in the context of the time by most of insults as well as jokes, insults are dead because they are so culture specific. So it's hard to figure out the exact nuances of dog's poo in that cultural context, even though we can guess that it's not something positive. So it's good to have several references which you can then compare what they mean in the context. So obviously it's something, if you are somebody who picks up Hundespulver, it doesn't go well with courting beautiful ladies. Wilde schönen Frauen Holdwesen, so kannst du nicht Hundespulver lesen. But it also relates to the physical features like krumm und höckerig. This ending recht, which comes a couple of times instead of the standard German rich, is a feature, one of the features that has allowed researchers to place the original play from which it was copied to Thuringia, because that's a typical adjective ending for that. Also typical for these comic sections is sexual innuendo, so in den Lenden lahm sein, to accuse him of impotence. And I was just asking about Lasterbalk and the figure, why have another servant coming in as the third servant? We don't fully know, but probably they were stock characters which people would recognize, like the different clown types or pantomime figures. which could cross over the different plays, and you would recognize them from their dress or from their overblown nose or big feet or whatever. A lot of the vocab that is here is referring to peasants' food, which otherwise we wouldn't know about, because the cookbooks don't cater for things like that. They would cater for the high standard. So what is probably meant with the things you would like to have for eating is things that would go in Scotland into a haggis, so the leftover, not very good bits of animals. What we also didn't manage to discuss was another made-up linguistic element, which is basically meant to sound impressive to the unlearned. So it's reflecting a kind of parody on scholarship and people who mumble. Do you also say the abracadabra in English as a magic spell? So it works for unlearned German as well as unlearned English, because it's just meant to be some form of Latin word. You might know the word hocus pocus. Is that also used in English? Yeah. So that comes from the a phrase for the Eucharist, hoc est corpus meus. So this is my body, which would be said by the priest when lifting up the host. So the kind of most holy point in the Mass is used to impress. If you look at words like necessitax, exitas, termax, it's a bit like Asterix use of typical endings with X to create a pseudo world of antiquity. Another source of comic is the juxtaposition of high literature sounding lines and ordinary speech. So he's complaining that he now has to carry the sack again because both his potential servants have absconded. But it's rhyming on a line that could be a direct quote from a dawn song. Min Friede, es ist nah wie im Tage. So Friede, the lover. And then it immediately goes into a description as if that's his Friede of the bottles he has lined up here. And most of these seem to have also some sexual references, so they are a kind of dodgy health food store to boost performance in bed for einen alten Mann, der nicht wohl gebrüten kann. I couldn't find what a Kobebenkoren is. The Reclam edition translates as pfeffercorn, but I think it's completely made up just from the context. So koren certainly is corn. Perhaps it's something like a nut, because Kobernus is walnuss. But these are ingredients which might have made sense to the audience, or they might have just been made up to amuse with an outlandish sound. Then what I'm also not quite sure is, because we don't have enough stage directions to figure out where the alten Wiebsinn are that are referred to. So the translator of the Reclam edition guesses these are extra on stage to play old women buying things at the market store. I think it's rather that they are talking insultingly about the three Marys who are already on stage and constantly. So that they are talking, when they're talking to them, as fair ladies, but when they're talking among themselves, they are referring to them as these old, I'm not sure what insult there is in English for old women, hags or whatever. And I also think this probably, the word is unclear. The Reclam edition translates it as brei, porridge, and so the editor constructed a backstory for it. There are these old women on stage eating their stuff, and they should stop eating this and rather buy the better porridge made by Rubin. But just to show you, there is nobody who knows the certain answer, and you really have to try to figure it out what makes sense dramatically, and we will never know what is the absolute answer. But I'd rather go from the context. You should throw something at them so that they stop with this constant lamenting. So pulsen, more like an onomatopoetic word for lamenting or talking.
Would this be seen as like humorous to the audience, or is it a bit more as like transgressive?
I think the fun of it is that it's constantly operating at the border between being transgressive or blasphemous and just outright comic. And as you know from any stand-up comedian, the better they are, the more they will sail close to this border. So it's certainly meant to be offensive, but how offensive and to whom is hard for us to work out. And also, I think I mentioned before, we always have to reckon with a lot of improvisation going on with it. So how insulting something is depends on how you act it out. Whether the laugh is on you, whether the laugh is on the Marys on stage, whether, let's say, Rubin is waving a big phallus on stage or making obscene gestures, we just can't figure out. Or whether he's saying in a remorseful tone, which I rather doubt. But the text that we have is really just the tip of the iceberg of the whole experience. And I would really encourage you to look for English parallels where we have much more of reports about contemporary performance. So if you look at how the witches scenes can be performed from Macbeth, there you'll have the whole range of them being really sinister, doomed creatures, apocalyptic, or just outright laugh out funny creatures. And I think Rubin is more limited in his scope, but still he can be from somebody who is seriously threatening Christianity by engaging in black magic, up to somebody who is just the court jester. But this kind of brewing or made up of completely ludicrous ingredients, throwing in sounds like Glockenklang. And I don't know, so I didn't fill in what the Schlegel is from which the blood is, or the Pflege from which the brain, the Gehirn is taken. But it's similar to the sliver of the moon's eclipse, which is also non-tangible elements going into the stuff like the Glockenklang.
So how would you actually translate the Schlegel in there?
The translator in the Reclam edition just gets around by leaving it as Schlegel und Pflege, so he doesn't have to commit to what it actually means.
Right, in English, how would you render that?
Schlegel, a baton. Pflege can be an insult for somebody, an uncouth person, but I don't think that's meant here. From a thing, from somebody. So that was still from the last, and we've partly now looked at how comic is produced and who is made fun out of, and then suddenly there comes the Latin, and with it the switch to a serious mode of reciting. And you have here then again a translation of the Latin. So we had here the shepherd is struck down, pastore, percusso, and then the sheep, the ovis erant misere. The spelling, incidentally, of Jesum with an IH reflects the Greek spelling of Jesus, Iota, Eta, Sigma, and the Eta is written like an H. That's why in medieval Latin the name Jesus is normally rendered with an H, even though it's etymologically wrong to spell it like that. The Halmstein schneiden means to cut a bladder stone, which would also, so Steinschneid would be one of the tasks of the traveling doctors. The spelling with M is a kind of popular etymology to relate it to the word harm, meaning, like in English, harming stone, but it comes from harren, which is urine. So, that's something that the doctor would check for in this, looking at the glass vial. Yeah, that's not really an illustration of Gänsemelken, but it's a manuscript I like, and shows just how animal imagery was abundant, of course, in a rural society.
What does milk geese mean? As in, like, Gänsemelken?
How do you milk geese?
I don't know.
You can't.
Okay.
Go away, milk geese. Do something absurd.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a mythical creature in German which is quite often referred to, eine eierlegende Wollmilchsau. If you want to talk about something all singing and dancing that could do everything, then you want to create a eierlegende Wollmilchsau, which obviously doesn't exist, but would have everything. So geese that would give milk would be a pathway towards this wonder animal that would give you all that you need. But here it's just a phrase that comes in different configuration always is Bass van ander, and then comes a different number. So this one thing is better than having four of another kind, and you have it with fünf or drei also. This is interesting because here in this song of Rubin, the two forms of singing that have been kept separate kind of merge. So you have the Marys with their Latin liturgical chanting on this part of the tragedy, and you have the soldiers and Rubin praising his master in a made-up German-Latin mix as a comedy. But here he picks up genuine liturgical phrases, just turns them into parody by repeating elements. So the Jesum, Jesum, Jesum you could still see as a serious triple invocation of Christ, but the Sal, Sal, Salvium, which rhymes on denarium, is clearly parodying the kind of liturgical long phrases like on an Alleluia, Alleluia. So he has Sal, Sal, Salvium, which isn't a really Latin word, so he just puts the sage, the balm or ointment into a Latin form. also the way in which he arranges their three names. It's the first time that they aren't just called personae, these persons, but given their biblical names. But he arranges them so that they nearly have a comic effect. Magdalena, Jakobina, Salomena. And this kind of ever closer interlinking of the two levels that up to then have been operating independently is repeated here, where the three Marys sing the missing last line of the verse that the Mercator is singing. I should have left off the full stop here. So, cum quo bene potestis ungere corpus domini sacratum is one phrase. So, and here I've no clue, nor has anybody else, I think, what exactly is meant and whether actually the person who wrote it down had a clear concept of what it was meant, or whether it should just sound grand. Here you can see a contemporary illustration of a medieval market where you could buy these things in the pots of ointment. This is a hat maker shop on the side, and currently, obviously, there is a fashion for very high felt hats. And there you see a barrel, how you would transport bigger goods. Oh yeah, by the way, you probably have caught on to that, but I've always used an asterisk if a word in modern German isn't any longer used, so it might have still been used in the 16th century, so you can reconstruct how the modern German quality would have been, but you can't, you won't be understood if you use it talking to a German. Here, so again, this is this kind of boasting phrase, die ist besser, wenn andere fünfe. So this one spicy bomb is better than 5 others put together. There's a lot of linguistic fun going on. So we had the Czech, but this is French-sounding swear words. The second one is more or less transparent, so that's malaventure, misadventure. Faculdei, or faculdai, no idea what that could be. And actually it would be a good creative writing exercise, actually doing a modern English version of the Innsbruck Easterplay, where you would just play around with all these and make them alive again, because the advantage of translation is that you can update, so you can make dead jokes come to life again. So that would be the ideal translation, actually, not trying to figure out necessarily what was meant literally by a swear word, but what would have the equivalent weight and sharpness in a modern context. So in 19th century Germany, the translators Schlegel and Tieck claimed that their Shakespeare was much better than the original Shakespeare. at least for a 19th century audience, because the 19th century German audience had the full original experience restored to them of understanding all sexual jokes and getting the full rudeness, which was lost on a 19th century English audience who weren't any longer offended by half of the things and didn't understand the other half of the things. So that would be the best version of translating this play, not necessarily finding out what faculty meant, but finding something that sounded funny, French or foreign, and would cause offense nowadays. Then comes the next stage fight now between the merchant and his wife, with the servants being drawn in it. And I've brought you an illustration from a manuscript from 1425, in which I did my PhD, which was written by a clerk from Nuremberg, Johannes Forster, who was contrasting vice and virtue in his illustration. So he contrasts alt und töricht, alt und torot, so old and stupid, opposite alt in Weisheit. And if you are wise, you sit at the foot of the pulpit and listen to the minister, or you engage in conversation over books, so a kind of book club, rather than going off into the country. In one hand, your rollator, your Zimmer frame, and the other pulling a young girl behind you. So that's the kind of Me Too debate. And the old woman says, "Wohin, altes Kalb? Where are you going, you stupid calf?" And trying to drag back the young girl. And here you see them nearly off to a stage fight, and Johann Forster has tried to indicate the alteration between them by having this kind of spit coming out of the mouth across there. So this then happens, and then you have an interesting discussion of what is meant by courtliness. So the word Hobbischheit, which is both hübsch and höfisch, so it's both being beautiful and courteous, coming from the word for Hof, as the equivalent for court. The interesting thing that it's seen as the not upper class thing to beat your wife in public, so it's something else. And what I found hilarious, so there is one linguistic commentary on the Innsbrucker Osterspiel, which is open access. It's from 1913, so if you Google it, you'll find it. And they also don't know about Schlegel and Flegel, but yeah, the linguistic commentary. And in 1913, the summary of this scene is, die Magd nimmt ihre Herrin in Schutz, obwohl Rubin weniger der Frau Antonie als seinem Herrn Vorwürfe gemacht hat. Die weibliche Unlogik ist gut gezeichnet. So that he saw it straight. Here, some more insults which would be fun to find a good English modern equivalent. So the Tempelrinne is somebody who runs to church all the time. I spoke with a friend who is a Protestant minister in Germany, and she said they would call them Kanzelschwalben, those who always sit adoringly under the pulpit and gaze up to the priest. It's a kind of chapel groupie, which isn't very good, but yeah. If you wanted to have some fun, try to find. I think if we want to get through the whole thing, we should go over to the dramatic reading. So, Konstantin, could I have you?
Tertia persona cantat.
Hoi nobis internis mentis, quanti pulsant gemitus, pro nostro consolatore, quo privamur misere, quem crudelis judeorum morti dedit populus. Ah, weh, an uns armen Frauen mag man nu wohl schauen, groß Jammer und Not, mein lieber Herre ist nu tot, den die Juden haben ermord an Schulde, als ihr Dicke habet gehört. Ah, weh der jämmerlichen Stund, die uns nürliches worden kund, dass wir unseren Herren nicht schulden sehen, wenn uns groß Leid ist geschehen. Secunda persona cantat.
Jam percusso cor pastore, oris erant misere, sic magistro discendente turbanto discipuli, atque nos absente eo dolor tenet nimius.
Dizit.
Ah weh, wie jämmerlich das steht, wo das wie eine Härten geht. Das mag man wohl schauen, an uns viel armen Frauen sind wir Jesum haben verloren, der uns zu Troste was geboren. Tertia persona cantat.
Veteamus et ad eius properemus tumulum, si dileximum viventem diligamus mortuum, et ungamus corpus eus oleo sanctissimo.
Edicit.
Es ziemt wohl guten Wieben, wer ihn lieb was an dem Liebe, dass sie ihm noch nach dem Tode klagen. Wir wollen gehen zu dem Grabe, dass wir unseren Herren sehen, wenn uns groß Leid ist geschehen. Rubin, Rubin, Rubin. Rubin non respondit nisi tertio dicit.
Weite, Herr, weite, ich bin noch unbereite. Ich habe mir den Sack verloren, den haben mir die alten Dieb gestohlen. Mercator convocat Rubinum.
Rubin, Rubin, Rubin. Rubin sileat et tacet. Rubin dicit.
Mir ist kommen vorhanden, ein Werk nicht bestanden. Ich schulde einem alten Weber den Hahnsteinschniede. Mit einer halben Schüssel, der Tufelgleim in Drussel. Mercator vocat Rubinum et dicit.
Rubin, Rubin, Rubin.
Bald, mir ist es übel gelungen. Ein alt Wieb hat mir den Sack abgedrungen.
There is somebody in the office next door, so I can't do it. Say, Rubin, Rubin, Rubin.
Was wollt ihr, Herr Meister mein?
Du machst wohl einen Schalk sehen.
Warum, was darum, lieber Herr? Man will ja wohl noch mehrere in Dorf und in Städten, die mir sind nimmer abgetreten. Schollte man alle Schelke Steine, da müsste man ihr Kind um seinen Vater weine. Schollte man alle Schelke aus der Stadt jagen, ihr müsst einen Mühle vorher Drabe. Schollte man die Stadt mit Schelken ummure, man setzt euch zu einer Torsule. Ihr seid ein Meister über alle Schelke, geht hin, ihr sollt die Gänse melke.
Rubin, lieber Knecht, nein, nur lass von dem Zorne dienen. Du hast mir übel gesprochen, daran hast du dich wohl gerochen. Ich sehe dort in einer Auen 3 schöne Frauen, sie weinen, sehre und klagen. Ich wähne, ihr Herr hat sie geschlagen. Geh hin und heiße herkommen, damit schicke wir unseren Frommen.
Das tu nicht, Herr Regiane, und wer ist noch 3 Stunden so ferne?
Et sic Rubin currit ad personas et dicit.
Gott grüßt euch, ihr 3 Frauen. Was ist mir in den Augen? Sind euer nicht wenn 3? Ich wende euer Schädel 5 sei. Gott grüßt euch, ihr 3 Frauen schier. Was waren andere 4? Tertia persona.
Gott danke dir, stolzer Jüngeling, dass Gott gebesser diene Ding.
Ihr Frauen, könnt ihr mir sagen, warum ist euer Wein und euer Klagen?
Ja, wir, stolzer Jüngeling, dass Gott gebessere diene Ding, das ist um den heiligen Mann, den die Juden zu Tode haben geschlagen. Kannst du uns gewiesen einen Mann, der zur Arztige ich gerate kann?
Geht mir noch, ich geh euch vor und tritt mir noch auf meiner Spur. Ich will euch wiesen einen Mann, der euch wohl gerochen kann.
Tunc precedet es et cantat.
Ibant tres mulieres, Jesum querentes, Maria Magdalena, Maria Jacobena, atque Salomena. Vociferas ditur tres mulieres, date mille denarium, dabo volvis salvium. Herr, ich hab's voll Land, denn noch ihr mich habet gesandt. Sie können uns wohl Rieche gemache, nun lüge wir wohl gelache. Mercator könntet?
Huc proprius volentes accedete, hoc unguentem si vultis emere, cum quo bene potestis ungere, Persone cantant, corpus domini sacratum, item cantant, dicto nobis mercator juvenis, hoc unguentum si tu vendideris, dic pretium quod tibi dabimus, hoi quantus est noster dolor.
Mercator könntet?
Hunc unguentum si multum cupitis, unum auri talentum dabitis, an aliter non deportabitis, hoi quantus est noster dolor. Rubin dicit?
Was heu? Was sagt ihr uns von Heu? Sagt uns von Ziegern und von Kässen, dessen wollen wir wohl genesen.
Secunda persona dicit?
Gott grüße dich, Krämer, guter Freund. Ist dir Arzt dir ich kund? Adi hast du ich sagen gut. Danach steht unser Mut. Mercator dicit?
Ja, ich Fraue selig wieb, ich han schließen minen lieb, noch ärztige Mann ich ja. Was ich euch sage, das ist wahr. Hier steht ein Makrai, so steht da ein Laurinabi, so ist das ein Nardipisti, so steht ein Alabastrum hi, dies besser wann anderdri. Tertia persona dicit: Sage, Meister, dass dich Gott lasse lebe, wie willst du uns die Salbe geben?
Mercator dicit?
Ich gebe eine um 1 Pfund, die anderen um 1 Vierdung, die dritte um rotes Goldes 1 Mark.
Prima persona dicit?
Meister, die Rede wäre uns zu stark.
Mercator dicit?
Ihr Frauen, kaufet Schiere, ich wäre lieber zu dem Wiene, denn wenn zu Biere. Rubin dicit?
Herr, du redest recht. Ich bin ja ein zorniger Knecht. Schall der mag ich länger wehren, ich wollte ihr das Pfaffen jähren. Der Persona dicit?
Meister, dass die Goldholz sie, hier sind guter Besanzen dri, darum gib uns die Maße, dass sich Gott lebe lasse.
Mercator dicit?
Ihr Frauen, ihr kauft ahne Schelden, ihr Besanzen will ich euch abegelden, nehmt die Würze darumbe, die's besser wann andere Fünfe. Uxor Mercatoris dicit?
Weh, das ist euch wert zur Unheile. Wie macht ihr uns so wohlfeile, dass uns kostet so manche Mark? Wollt ihr darum diesen Karg? Mercator percutit uxorem et dicit?
Fakultei, Malaventure, ach du alte Ungeheure!
Ach, ist das wohl getan, dass ein unverwiesen Mann soll schlagen seine Frauen, bis dir kein Heil nimmer müsse gesauen. Es ist des Teufels Minne, dass die alten Mann beginnen.
Zwieget und lasset ihr Klaffen stan, es dunket mich nicht wohlgetan, wenn Lüte hier zu uns kommen, dass ihr sie hindert an ihrem Fromm.
Ja, leider, sind das die neuen Kleider, die mir zu diesen Ostern hast gegeben, dass du das Jahr nimmer musst überleben?
Rubin dicit?
Ah ja, Herr, das ist mir leid. Dass ihr vergesset euer Hohescheid. Ihr habet unhebischlich getan, dass ihr habet meine Frauen geschlagen, vor aller Werde öffentlich. So tut ihr unhebischlich. Liebe Frau, ich sage euch das, vertraget mir nicht Herrn vor was. Ankilla, die Kind als Rubin.
Tu zu den Pflanz, du böser Wicht! Wie taust du reden ich wie dem Herren zu? Unart! Du solltest es bloß wohl haben bewahrt. Erlöse uns von deiner Teidinge, oder du hast böse Gedinge.
Ach du alte Tempeltrete, das ist alles Ding Geräte, das ist meiner Frau und mir's geht, dass sie mein Herr dazu schlägt. Weh, du alte Tempelrinne, dass dich der Teufel fuhre von hinnen. Ich sag, dass dich der Pfaffe fuhrte hinter den Altar und lad dich den Salter. Er schließt dich mit dem Arme, er machte Schabedei den Juden erbarmen.
Herre, ich will euch sagen mehre, wollt ihr folgen meiner Lehre, ich will es wohl erdenke, dass wir es ihm getränken.
Nur, lieben Lüte, die da ist und mal nehmen, das sind Brüte. Mein Herr hat seine Frauen geschlagen, mit der Frust an den Kragen, durch der Drüher Pulken willen, dass sie der Teufel fuhre von hinnen. Mercator dicit ad personas?
Ihr Frauen, geht mit Heile, um das Geld ist die Salbe wohl feile. Rubin, es mag dem Abend nähen, ich will mich schlafen legen und lass dir den Kram befahlen sehen und hüt mir der Frauen mähen.
Lieber Herr, das schall sehen, das spreche ich auf die treue Min. Mercator ponicitum. Rubin dicit ad uxorum mercatoris. Frau, lass den alten Mann sehen und zog mit mir an den Rehen.
Uxor mercatoris dicit?
Rubin, lieber Rubin, als den Wille ist, als ist der Mut Min. Rubin, lieber Buhle, fuhr mich nicht in die Schule. Komm ich in das Schulhus, ich komme nimmer weiter Hus.
Tunc Rubin et uxor mercatoris recedunt.
Was hält Mercator? So geht es.
Oh weh, ich war's übel gehüt. Mir ist gestohlen mein Wieb und mein Gut. Die Füße ihn nachtragen, sollte ich darum werden zerschlagen. So, we're coming for next week to the last part of the Innsbruck Easterplay, which is the oldest part, because that's directly developed out of the liturgical chants for Easter, the sequence of which is sung in the person of Mary Magdalene, Victimae Paschali Laudes, and out of the dialogue that is in this liturgical chant between the apostles and Mary Magdalene, which is taken from the Bible, Dic nobis Maria, quid vidisti in via, tell us, Mary, what did you see when you were on your way? The whole backstory of this visitation is developed. Here you see a ivory panel where Mary Magdalene is kneeling before the risen Christ to see his wounds. And so next time there won't be so many laughs because and we'll struggle more with trying to get the Latin right. All right, so see you